Hello, everyone. We have some exclusive polling of BC voters by Leger that offers some interesting early insights into how different federal election promises and the leaders are resonating here in this province. So, here to share these results and tell us what they mean is pollster Andrew Enns, Executive Vice President with Leger. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Harold. Nice to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. So I'm going to have to refer to my notes because it is a bit complicated, but there's a series of questions in this latest poll for us that measures support on 8 different election promises, 2 each from the Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and the Greens, without revealing to the people being polled which party made the promise. So they're all geared around economic recovery, and they're all basically promises these parties made with the idea of how to get us post-pandemic back in a positive state of mind. So it's all aimed at recovery. But when you look at that, the top rated of all of them supported policy, with 4 in 10 people supporting, is the proposal to create 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic within a year. That was one of the policies of the Conservative Party. Next, at 34%, is ensuring that economic recovery succeeds in a low carbon future, investing in clean energy, climate resilience, social infrastructure. That was an NDP promise. The highest rated Liberal policy is 5th out of 8, and that's the $15 an hour federal minimum wage that rises with inflation. Only about 20% of people think that the Conservatives' idea of a 1-month GST tax holiday is important. And the lowest ranked of all is another Liberal promise, the $400 million for charities and nonprofits to aid with economic recovery. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that series of questions and responses. What are some of your takeaways, Andrew?
Sure, and you're right, Harold. I mean, it's there is a bit to unpack here, and but what we were trying to get at too is without, by not revealing where these platforms came from, we were just trying to take a little bit of the partisan sort of, I'm voting Liberal, so I like the Liberal, and I'm voting NDP, and I like, so we, it is a bit interesting. I think off the top, if we look at a couple of the more, selected promises by the parties. Clearly, the Conservatives, hit the mark with their economic recovery plan for Canada. The 1 million jobs is a prominent, not an overly complicated, lots of details to go into that to get there. But it was a clear on-message platform announcement when that came out. I think a lot of discussion was around the cover of their platform and the way Aaron O'Toole was portrayed, and I know that cover made its way around social media quite a bit because it was a little bit unusual for a political party, and even especially the more kind of buttoned down Conservatives, is a little more modern, I guess you would say. I think all that combined to get the word out that here's their plan and here's a key part of their plan, 1 million jobs. I think the NDP also did well connecting with British Columbians because, they had a very prominent announcement on an issue that's very near and dear, we know from other Leger polling, on climate change. And so I think both those two parties did well to get out early. They've got the most work to do in this campaign. They're trying to unseat a government. And so I think those two parties did well. The Liberals have sort of opted for some a bit more, I would say, specific policy announcements that I don't think they're unpopular, but they didn't sort of capture the same level of imagination, I think, of voters. That said, there's lots of campaign, and I fully expect the Liberals are going to be, at this and coming out with a few more things to chart out their path for Canada economically going forward.
Yeah, and it's true. It's not unusual for an incumbent government to wait to release their platform later in the campaign. So, often as an incumbent, you're on the defensive more for your record as opposed to your promises. So, I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that, and that you'd get bold promises from the opposition parties that are looking to unseat them. But it was interesting that the Liberals didn't fare so well on that list, and the Greens, even a couple of their policies were more popular.
Right. Well, and the other thing with respect to incumbent governments is that what also happens to you when you're in government is you do get a bit fenced in by the fact you're government. You sort of have, as you say, the record, and so sometimes you have to play within some of what you've previously talked about, and and the Liberals have announced a fairly significant budget not that long ago, which contained a number of promises and framework for sort of the economic recovery of Canada. So those things also act as somewhat I wouldn't say hindrances, but they're sort of guideposts that it's difficult to go outside those without sort of raising questions as to how does this square with your previous commitments while you were in government, sort of, so to speak.
Well, looking kind of trying to parse through how British Columbians responded to these policy and these promises. Is there anything that the parties can glean from them as far as like, oh, we can build on this, or we should probably move away from that, or this creates an opportunity then to spin something else out on the same vein?
Well, I think the NDP and the Conservatives will feel good about their initial announcements, and I think they will continue to hammer home some of those themes. I think Aaron O'Toole's camp will like some of the enthusiasm that he likely feels he's getting from his first week in the campaign. We talked in an earlier video, Howard, how the ballot numbers have shifted, and the Conservatives look like they've moved up a bit in the polls, so he'll feel emboldened by that. And I think you'll see the Liberals, they'll want to do better in British Columbia. British Columbia is a critically important province for them electorally. They won 11 seats last time, and they absolutely need to win more seats if they're going to form their majority government. And so I fully expect you're going to see a lot more of Mr. Trudeau, and you're going to see, a bit more aggressive on some of the policy announcements, and likely the critiques of his opponents.
Right. Opponents, plural, right? Because of the three-year rules here in BC. Okay. And then I guess not surprisingly, Leger found when it comes to the leaders, 98% of respondents are familiar with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. You wonder about the other 2%, how they don't know who he is. 88% are familiar with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Then there's a drop off to Aaron O'Toole of the Tories. He's down at 70%, and Anna-May Paul is down at 41% for the Greens. Obviously, the last two being relatively recent leaders, new leaders. But what kind of, when you see numbers like that, what kind of opportunities or risks does that present particularly for, I guess, O'Toole and Paul, who have room to grow their, at least people's understanding of who they are? Whether they like them or not is another question. But what's ahead for them?
Well, I think the situations are a little different between O'Toole and Paul. I mean, Anna-May Paul she has one mission in this election, as far as I can see: win her seat in Toronto Centre. And I'm not sure she's left Toronto Centre yet. I suspect, maybe she has, but I suspect she'll make a few forays outside of Ontario into. I'm positive she'll come to British Columbia. I mean, there's Green support. She's got a few 2 seats on the island that she would dearly love to hold. But quite frankly, for her, I think name recognition, raising that sort of level is less important unless it's a Toronto Centre voter that needs to know. For Aaron O'Toole, it is an important factor. I mean, first of all, I have to say at 70%, I was somewhat surprised at that level, in the sense that I'd seen polling earlier in the summer that had his name recognition levels up around 50%. So he's, and I think that launch in the days leading up to the campaign, where there was a lot more attention on leaders and what was going on, probably did him well in at least getting him exposed to voters. And so, I think first of all, we would be pleased with seeing that move up. The risk reward here with Aaron O'Toole is, voters will be aware of Aaron O'Toole. I don't think they'll know Aaron O'Toole. That is his goal during the campaign. But it's also the goal of his opponents that they'll attempt to inform voters of who Aaron O'Toole is. And they will do so in not a flattering way. Aaron O'Toole, meanwhile, will be trying to put forward his best case attributes. And that's almost a campaign within a campaign. We've got policies and platforms, but within all that, there's going to be this person, this struggle. And for Aaron O'Toole, he will be introducing himself to voters for the first time, which presents opportunity. It's for some voters, it's a blank slate, and he can go in and tell them who he is. Army, Air Force veteran, and a lawyer, and some things like that, and they may be impressed by that or not, but it's an opportunity. His opponents, though, will seek to do the same thing and try to get in before that, and provide maybe a less flattering perspective, and it's that challenge. But for Aaron O'Toole, like I always say, like it or not, people are going to get to know him in this campaign, because he gets his 5 minutes of news media coverage just like every other leader every day. When he was in opposition prior to the election, he'd be fighting for news media coverage. Especially in a pandemic. And the pandemic was horrible for opposition leaders. I mean, it was hard to get a word in between medical health officials and prime ministers and all the rest. Now it's equal billing, and it's what he does with that is going to be important.
Yeah, and of course, even like the leaders debate will be a big part of that too. Just familiarity and people's perceptions going in, whether they're formed by how the opposition presents him or how he presents himself.
Absolutely.
Less work for Trudeau and Singh to do on that front, though, I guess, because people are fairly familiar with who they are and what they stand for.
For sure. I mean, I think their awareness levels for sure are much higher. They both have fought. Trudeau this is his third campaign. Mr. Singh's his second. So now it's rounding out and demonstrating, and we might chat about this in a minute, but demonstrating, not introducing who you are, but really talking about your strength and your qualities. They'll recognize who this person is, but now it's about what they bring to the job of Prime Minister.
Yes, and that's just what I was going to ask you about. I mean, Jagmeet Singh, if I was him, I would be thrilled with these latest Leger results around how people perceive the leaders. He's miles ahead of the others in the minds of respondents when it comes to traits like honesty and ethical behavior and trust and empathy. Trudeau is ahead around strong leadership and charisma in people's minds. O'Toole performed poorly on all counts, at least in this latest polling. So, I mean, how important are these results in influencing voter preference? And again, where are the risks for them all, and where are the opportunities?
Well, for sure, Harold. So we ran a battery of these characteristics. We've done this before, and we've asked, which leader best exemplifies these various traits. I'll say this about Miss Paul and Mr. O'Toole. This can be a challenging sort of question for them, in the sense that, as you said, 70% of voters are familiar with Mr. O'Toole, for example, but that doesn't necessarily mean they really know Mr. O'Toole, in the sense of, can they sort of say, well, is he honest, or is he a strong leader? They may have seen him this week on TV for the first time, and so they can say, well, I've seen the guy. Case in point, Aaron O'Toole has got about 24% of voters say they would be very familiar with Mr. O'Toole, and that compares to the Prime Minister at 68%. So quite a gap. So I think, O'Toole and Paul are handicapped in this. That said, I think for Aaron O'Toole, what's going to be critical for him is working hard to continue to constantly putting forward a really strong, positive, persona to voters. And I think ultimately, and voters there's going to be a question in this campaign that voters are likely going to get to in the next, somewhere over the course of the campaign. I'd venture to say after the debates and before the election, where they're going to reflect on these leaders in terms of, can they be prime minister? Like, do they have what it takes? Strong leader, for example. The right characteristics to be prime minister. I do say Aaron O'Toole could very well be evaluated in that light, and he wants to do his best to try to prep the voters when they come to make that decision. It's a tough job. There's a lot of stuff coming at you, but that's what he'll be wanting to do. And likewise for Justin Trudeau, voters know that he's been prime minister. The question for them is, are they prepared to keep him as prime minister? And he'll want to again put forward, those arguments. For Justin Trudeau, it may be less about those positive features and more maybe about sort of, I dare say it may come down to more some of the features of the other leaders and whether or not they feel they measure up.
And for Jagmeet Singh?
Well, for Jagmeet Singh, look, he needs to. He's riding some popular sentiment in terms of who he is. His real effort is to try to take that and connect to the voter level and translate that into some more votes. And that's been really, we've had very, very popular NDP leaders back through time. Jack Layton being the most recent. It's always been a real challenge for the NDP leader to unlock, to take that popularity and find a way to unlock a lot of votes to translate that into a real bump up in seats. But I've talked to would-be politicians before and existing politicians, and I've always said, at the end of the day, it's easier to get votes if people don't hate you. So, so Jagmeet Singh's got something, and he just has to, and the nice thing for that is that people, it might mean people will listen to him.
Right.
Which first step of it's a first step in the process.
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, this is really helpful. Thank you for joining us again, and we look forward to our next chat. As we, follow Leger polling and the candidates and the leaders in the week ahead. Thank you, Andrew.
Sounds great, Harold. Look forward to it, and have a good rest of your day.